Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. I am so excited you're tuning in because today we're tearing down and inspecting the absolute most important building block of the internet. I want you to think about building a website exactly like building a house. Before you can paint the walls or install some fancy smart home system, you need a rock-solid foundation and a really sturdy structural frame. Well, in the digital world, HTML is that essential foundation. Honestly, without it, the rest of the web simply wouldn't exist. Okay, so first things first, we gotta clear up a really common misconception. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. The absolute key word there is markup. It is not a programming language. HTML literally does not care about logic, math, or complex algorithms. Instead, it just provides the structural foundation and the actual content of a web page. It's distinctly separate from the styling, the colors and fonts, which is handled by CSS, and it's separate from the interactive logic, which is handled by JavaScript. HTML is simply about answering one core question. What is this content and how is it organized? Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We're going to take this digital house build step by step. We'll start with the blueprint, move on to the brain, build out our framework, fill it with content, add some interaction, and then wrap up by looking at the whole web ecosystem. Section 1. The blueprint, laying the foundation. Every house needs a standardized blueprint before a single wall actually goes up, right? Well, web browsers expect the exact same thing. Every single HTML document on the internet relies on this essential skeleton. First, we have the doctype HTML declaration. This absolutely must be the very first line. It basically tells the browser, hey, render this page using modern HTML5 standards. Next up, we wrap everything in the HTML element, which acts as the root of our entire document. Inside of that, the document is split into two massive pieces, the head and the body. The head is for all the behind-the-scenes data the browser and search engines need, while the body, that's for everything the user actually sees on the screen, like your text, your images, and your buttons. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how simple the syntax actually is. Let's do a quick line-by-line walkthrough of how tags wrap around content to create an element. An HTML element generally has three parts. Over on the left, we have the opening tag, which is surrounded by angle brackets, like this P right here, for a paragraph. In the middle, we have our actual content, the text, hello world. And then on the right, we have the closing tag. Notice the /? That is absolutely crucial. It tells the browser, okay, this element is finished. The tag just wraps around the content to give it structure and meaning. Section 2. The brain information behind the scenes. Let's look a little closer at the head element we just mentioned. Think of this as the utility room, or really, the brain of your house. Inside the head, we put meta tags. Now, these don't show up on the page itself, but they are critical. The charset UTF-8 tag sets the character encoding. This ensures that all your text, special characters, and yes, even emojis render perfectly. Then we have the viewport meta tag. If you want your house to look good on a smartphone, and you definitely do, you absolutely need this. It tells mobile browsers to scale the page to fit the device's width. Finally, the description meta tag is your SEO snippet. That's the short little summary that appears right under your page title in Google search results. Now, also in the head, we often load JavaScript, but there's a crucial distinction in how we load it safely so we don't accidentally break our site. If you just use a standard script tag, the browser literally stops building the HTML to go download the script, which totally slows down your page. To fix this, we use attributes. Using defer is usually your best default. It tells the browser to keep parsing the HTML in the background, download the script, and only run it once the HTML is completely finished. Plus, it maintains the exact order of your scripts. Async, on the other hand, executes the millisecond it's downloaded totally independently. This is great for standalone things like Google Analytics, but really bad if your script relies on the HTML being fully loaded first. Section 3. The framework, structuring with meaning. Okay, it's time to build the walls of our house using semantic HTML. The W3C HTML documentation puts it perfectly. A section is a thematic grouping of content, typically with a heading. Semantic elements are simply tags that have actual built-in meaning. In the old days of the web, developers used the generic div tag for literally everything, but a div doesn't mean anything. When you use a semantic tag, you're telling both the browser and screen readers exactly what each room in your digital house is actually used for. So let's address a really common point of confusion directly: the difference between a section and an article. They seem kind of similar, but they serve totally different purposes. A section is a thematic grouping within a page, like a chapter in a book, or maybe a specific part of a landing page. An article, however, is for independent, self-contained content that makes sense completely on its own, like a blog post or a forum comment. Actually, think of it this way. A newspaper is a section, but the specific news stories inside it are articles. You could rip an article right out of the paper, hand it to a friend, and it would still make total sense out of context. Alongside section and article, we have tags like header for your logos and titles, nav for your major navigation menus, main for the dominant, unique content of the page, and footer for your copyright info down at the bottom. Using these tags improves your SEO because search engines can finally understand your page's structure, but most importantly, it guarantees screen reader accessibility. Visually impaired users rely heavily on these semantic tags to navigate the architecture of your site seamlessly. Section 4. Content. Filling the house. So we have our structural framework. Now it's time to fill the rooms of our house with text, links, and media. To add links and images, we use attributes, which are basically just extra pieces of information injected right into the opening tag. For links, we use the anchor element, the A tag, but it needs an href attribute to tell it where to link to. For images, we use the self-closing image tag. It requires a source attribute pointing to the image file and, crucially, an alt attribute. The alt text is a direct description of the image. Let me emphasize this. Accessibility is a mandatory best practice, not an afterthought. If an image fails to load, or if a user is relying on a screen reader, that alt text is literally the only way they'll know what the image is. Section 5. Interaction. Adding the fixtures. Now we're adding the fixtures. Think of forms and inputs like the light switches, thermostats, and faucets of your digital house. It's where the user finally gets to interact with the environment. And this brilliantly illustrates how easily a functional data collection form is assembled step by step. First, you create the form wrapper to hold everything together. Step 2, you provide a label so the user actually knows what you're asking for. Step 3 is the input field itself where they type. And finally, step 4, you add a button to submit the data. It's just incredibly logical. Now, the true power of the input element comes from its type attribute. By simply changing one single word, you completely change how the input behaves. If you set the type to email, the browser automatically checks to make sure the user actually typed an add symbol. Free validation. If you use type date, you get a free interactive calendar UI right in the browser. Using type radio creates a mutually exclusive group where only one option can be selected. Plus, using the correct type automatically gives mobile users the correct keyboard, like instantly popping up a numbers-only keypad for a phone number field. Section 6. The web ecosystem, HTML, CSS, and JS. Let's step back for a second, look at our finished house, and see how everything connects. Here is the mental model you should absolutely take away from this explainer. HTML provides the structural foundation and the real meaning of your content. CSS acts as the interior design, the paint, the fonts, and the layout. JavaScript is the plumbing and the electricity. It's what makes the house actually do things when you flip a switch. But remember, clean semantic HTML is the non-negotiable foundation that makes the rest possible. You cannot paint a wall that doesn't exist, and you definitely cannot wire a house that has no frame. So the crucial point here is that mastering HTML empowers you to build the web from the ground up. If HTML is your foundation, CSS your paint, and JavaScript your electricity, what kind of digital house are you going to build first? Grab a text editor, write out that skeleton code, and start laying your bricks today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy coding.